All right, welcome to the season 1, episode 1 of a new thing that Kellie and I are doing called This and That Coffee Chat. Grab a cup of coffee and join us. When we do this each week, we're going to look at what the economic news is that's coming out in a given week. We might then recap it the following week to see how things are going. And then we'll talk a little bit of real estate, but not too much. And then we'll talk about what happened the previous weekend in sports and entertainment that we found interesting and that we wanted to share with you. And then what's going on in Tucson.
Yep.
So there we go. Anything you want to add, or did I?
I think you covered it.
All right. So being the economist, I get to do the economic stuff. So this week, 3 major announcements. So on Tuesday, the Consumer Confidence Index came out, and it remained relatively steady, dropped slightly in the future outlook, but went up in the current outlook. So they look forward-looking, and also, how do you feel about the economy right now? So not much change there. New home sales came out today, as we're recording this on Wednesday, and a fairly sizable month-to-month drop in new home sales. That said, the previous month had a fairly sizable increase. But year over year, if I can find my notes here real quickly, home sales year over year dropped by 13%. So it's an interesting item. During the month of June, which we're almost done with, a lot of the builders have aggressively gone after buyers by using incentives, and they're also building smaller houses right now, as that's more affordable. So they're trying to meet the buyer where they need to be. And then additionally, one of the things why we look at this is the housing industry leads the economy. So when the housing industry gets into trouble, usually recession follows, because so many other industries are tied in to the work that the home builders do. So any other thoughts on that piece?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what the June numbers come out as, because when we're looking at like month over month data, 1 month is just that. It's 1 month. It's not a trend. But then if we see, the June data comes out and we see another decrease, okay, now we're getting closer to a trend. And so I think it'll be interesting to see going forward what these numbers show, and if it was just that a lot of people bought new homes in April and then didn't buy them in May, or we actually have something going on here.
Exactly. And then the final piece of information that's going to come out at the end of the week on Friday, and it's something that the Federal Reserve looks at very closely, is the PCE, and that's the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index. So it looks at what consumers are actually buying and what they're paying for it. The last 2 months, it's been up 2.7%, which again is higher than what the Federal Reserve would like. So this will definitely impact their decision making coming forward. I'll do a longer video later this week on the second half outlook for the real estate market. And many of the experts feel that the Federal Reserve will cut rates in September. I'm not as optimistic there, in part because there's an election coming up, and some of the members of the Federal Reserve Board might not want to try to influence the election by cutting rates so close to the election. And also, quite frankly, I don't think they're seeing enough movement in the numbers to really make them feel comfortable with a rate cut quite yet. So we'll see how that works out. So there we go. That's what's going on this week. You want to talk about, let me actually get my agenda back out, because there we go. Oh, you want to talk a little bit about the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, settlement, and we're not going to talk about the whole thing, but we're going to talk about one specific aspect of it that if you're a buyer, it's going to impact you fairly soon.
Yeah, so there are several pieces to what has come about with the NAR settlement, and we've sort of refrained from really talking about this much yet, but I think we're at the place where things have settled enough that we feel more comfortable talking about it. And a lot of this is still to be determined on how it's totally going to play out, but this is what we know for now. So I think today we're going to talk a little bit about the buyer-broker agreement, otherwise known as the buyer exclusive employment agreement, basically the buyer's version of a listing agreement. And this is something that we've been doing for quite a while, but because it hasn't been a mandatory piece, a lot of people haven't.
Yes.
So it's possible that you could have bought a home and have never seen a document that's looked like this before, because your agent may not have used it. So you gave our clients yesterday a nice overview of how we got here historically with
Yes.
buyer representation and then the lawsuit and all that. Would you like to give
Sure.
that synopsis again?
Sure. Up and until the 1990s, there wasn't such a thing as a buyer's agent. There were selling agents, and then there might be agents that would help people look for a home, but quite frankly, especially if it was a dual agency situation where both agents were from the same brokerage, they weren't under any obligation under the law to really serve the buyer well. In other words, they're looking out for the interests of the seller. So there was a lawsuit in Minnesota against one of the large brokerages there that basically created the concept of a buyer's agent. And so since then, we've had this very clear delineation between representing a buyer and representing a seller, whether they're from different brokerages, which we call single agency, because each client is represented by a different company. I've never, and I told our clients this yesterday, it seems like that would be dual agency because you have two different brokerages representing two different clients. But no, that's single agency. Dual agency is when a single brokerage is representing both the buyer and the seller. So anyway, so there are very specific rules and regulations that we as real estate agents have to follow when representing a buyer in a single agency, and some of that changes slightly when we're representing them in a dual agency.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of information.
So we can't do anything that would disadvantage either the seller or the buyer with information that we may have through conversations with our clients. So that has been the situation for 30 years now, and quite frankly, and we'll probably do a longer video on this whole subject, we think what the NAR settlement of this most recent lawsuit will do is actually harm buyers once again and get them back. So traditionally, sellers have paid the commission of both the selling agent and the buying agent.
Basically coming about from the 90s lawsuit.
From the 90s lawsuit. Now the seller has the option to not pay the buyer's commission, which if I'm selling a home, I want to entice buyers to come in, and if I'm effectively adding 3-4% to the cost of my home by making them pay for the buyer's commission, might not work out real well for the seller. In addition, that might cause buyers to go unrepresented again.
Yeah, I don't need your help. I don't need anyone's help.
As they were prior to the 1990s. And to me, that's a bigger issue because now you have experts representing one side while the other side is not being represented by experts. And I can see lawsuits 10 years from now coming out of this NAR settlement because it has harmed buyers more than sellers might have been harmed by the paying of commissions for both the buyer and selling agent.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Well, when you're talking about, our contract to begin with is 10 pages, assuming we have no additional addenda added to that. So, when we are sitting down with our buyers, we go through paragraph by paragraph.
We read the contract slowly.
What is in here? What are your obligations? What are your ways out if need be before they go and sign it? That's a lot of explanation that a buyer might not get if they opt to go unrepresented.
And in Arizona, there are very specific timelines in that contract.
Contractual deadline is passed.
The biggest one in my mind is the due diligence period where you get your inspections done. We, as the buyer's agent, coordinate those because we have to give the inspectors access to the home. An unrepresented buyer is not going to have the means to do that without perhaps the selling agent has to open up the house for the inspectors. I don't know. We're a couple months away from all this coming out, and so we'll see how that turns out. The other thing that I think people will find off-putting for a while, because they haven't had to do this before. I don't know what the percentage of buyers actually have a buyer-broker agreement with their agents, but under the new regulations that are coming out, before we show a single house to that buyer, we have to have an employment agreement.
Just sign the damn contract.
In place. Now, that employment agreement might only be for one day,
Right.
but it's going to lead to awkward situations. For example, you're a buyer and you go to an open house, and the house might not be exactly what you want, but you hit it off with the agent that is doing the open house, and the agent says, well, there's a couple more houses right around the corner, be happy to show those to you. That'd be great. What time are you done with your open house? Oh, we're done at 3. Wonderful. Oh, but before I can go show you those homes, I need you to sign a contract.
Oh, well, that is awkward.
That is awkward.
Gonna be awkward, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that'll take a little getting used to, probably from both parties,
Yes.
about how we negotiate those sorts of situations going forward.
Yes. And again, we walk our clients through those contracts paragraph by paragraph. It's not exactly a quick sign this and move on, because we want you to know and understand what you're signing.
Trust me, it'll be fine.
And so, the fact that we'll have to start bringing those contracts, blank ones, to appointments or open houses, going to be very interesting.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the potential negatives of this. I do think there are maybe some positives coming out of this.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yes.
I think the big one is that I think it will help buyers and agents better define the agent-client relationship. I think for listings and sellers, this has been really clear, because it's very clear when you sign that listing agreement that that agent is representing you for that transaction. But we haven't really had that with buyers, because while some agents use buyer brokers, some agents don't. Sometimes that creates conflict of one agent feeling like they are representing a buyer, and then another agent feels like they maybe are owed compensation because they introduced that buyer to a property. We get situations like that happen sometimes, and so I think this will better define the relationship. I think
Yes.
that will be a good thing in the long run for the industry. I just hope that some of these other negatives don't take away from that.
Yeah.
So I do like that piece of it.
Yeah, and then we'll just mention one more thing, and then we'll move on from this particular subject. The other big negative that's coming out of the settlement that also impacts the buyer. We right now are able to show what the co-op fee is that the seller's willing to pay the buyer's agent. And that's right on our MLS. It's public information, and as of August, that information is going to be pulled from MLS, and it's a lack of transparency, if you ask me.
What are you hiding?
We will find out either from the listing agent or from the brokerage what the co-op fees are that they're willing to pay before we go show clients.
But that's going to be a house-by-house situation.
Yes.
Every house we show, as of how this is being played out right now, we will have to find out before
Yes.
we go show that property what is the co-op going to be, if
Yeah.
any.
So right now it takes us less than 30 seconds to look that up. So,
Yeah.
and it's also now publicly displayed
Right.
to the buyer, so they can know what it is before they ask us to go show them a house,
Right.
because we have that agreement in place.
Yeah, it allows buyers right now to decide, our agreement, let's say, is X%, but the seller is only offering Y. Buyer would have to make up that difference between X and Y, and maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they can't do that because they don't have any additional funds, and so they've said, I don't want to see any properties that don't offer X co-op. Well, now we have to go figure out where this information is going to be, potentially on each brokerage's website. Still a lot to be played out here.
Yes.
But we're going to have to be telling the buyers if it's a property that, based on the co-op, they want to see or not, if they have directly told us that they don't want to see anything offering less.
And we're not going to talk about this week, but maybe we'll talk about next week. The impact on veteran home buyers is going to be fairly profound. And
if the rules don't change.
If the rules don't
which
change.
It's looking like they may.
However, the way the temporary rule was written is kind of flies into the face of what the lawsuit against the NAR was about, as far as standard and ordinary fees. So,
which there are none.
Right, but we'll leave that little cliffhanger for next week.
Gary, why are you talking in cliffhangers?
Yeah, as we said, there's still a lot to be figured out on this. All we know is that by mid-August, we have to start playing by these rules. And so we have a month and a half.
Yes, to figure it out.
Yeah.
So, all right, on to the next item. So, weekend in review.
I have 2 items on my list for this.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and kick off with your first one.
All right, so my first one is Tucson relevant, and that is that our monsoon really actually started. So the monsoon technically, by record keeping, goes from June 15th to September 30th. But it's pretty rare that we actually have that monsoon activity in June. Typically, it doesn't really start up till July.
Right.
And so the fact that we had it, not that far into the official monsoon calendar was pretty exciting. I also learned that the monsoon can also be tracked by the dew point, and so 3 consecutive days with a dew point at 55 degrees or above is monsoon activity. And typically that doesn't happen until July 3rd is the average for the start of monsoon based on dew point levels. And so to have these levels happen again in the first couple weeks was pretty exciting for us. So
yes, and matter of fact, we've been in the 60s for well over a week as far as the dew point, which means it's uncomfortably muggy outside.
By our standards.
By our standards, because we're used to like 5% humidity. So, anything over 12 is humid to us. Yeah. Let's be clear, but we're up in the 30s. So
yeah, 30s,
on some
40s, 50s some days.
Yes. Now, we have had the benefit because there's been so much moisture coming in that we've had a fair amount of cloud cover.
Yes.
So it has not gotten terribly hot at the same time.
Right.
Which also somewhat inhibits the formation of thunderstorms because the ground needs to be heated up, provide the lift to then lift that moisture up and form those thunderstorms. So, but that said, we had flooding in Tucson on Saturday.
Yes.
In the usual locations. You can pretty much figure out where it's going to flood because the washes run this way. Certain streets become washes, and
yeah, good chunks of Midtown got hit pretty hard this weekend.
Yes.
Had flowing water down the roads.
Yes.
So stay out of those areas if you're driving in them when monsoons hit.
Yes. Turn around, don't drown.
Yeah.
That's the motto here.
Will be a broken record on that one, but
yeah, yes, indeed. So what's great though is we get a good chunk of our rain during the monsoon. So hopefully it won't be an early end to the monsoon, that we have a good monsoon throughout the summer and get lots of rainfall. So that helps everything.
And it keeps temperatures a lot more bearable.
Yes, it does.
So.
All right, so my next item is if you could see the other wall, so you have my 49ers shrine behind me. On the other side of the wall is all racing memorabilia. Auto racing, yes. And also a photograph of my grandfather's college basketball team that he was on.
That's the anomaly of
the
wall over there.
But nonetheless, so we're both motorsports fans, and this last weekend at New Hampshire, which quite frankly puts on some kind of boring races a lot of the time, put on a banger. About 2/3 of the way through the race, a big thunderstorm rolled through, got the track quite wet, They spent about 40 minutes trying to dry the track, and then they said, well, let's put the rain tires on and let's see how this works.
You might want to clarify that this was NASCAR.
This is NASCAR, yes. This is NASCAR Cup Series. Now, in the past, we didn't have rain tires.
Yeah, that's a new development.
And then a
for
fairly
NASCAR.
new development at what they refer to as short track. So anything a mile and under is a short track in NASCAR's vernacular. They now bring rain tires. The concept always was, well, if it rains before the race, we will dry the track using the rain tires and then at some point declare the track dry and then switch over to the slicks. They won't run during the rain because the visibility is too poor.
Other series have this issue too.
Yes.
It's not just a NASCAR issue.
Not just a NASCAR issue. So this is the first time they've ever put the rain tires on mid-race. And they were 5 and 6 wide as the drivers were looking for the grip. We had people running on the aprons in turns 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We had people all the way up against the wall. They were running everywhere, and it was some of the best racing I've seen this year. And the only other race that really competes with that is the Bristol race from earlier this year, where they put a different sealer down on the track, and it destroyed the tires that Goodyear brought. And it was the wily veterans that knew how to take care of tires that ended up moving to the front of the field and winning that thing. So those two races have shown NASCAR that for better racing, you need to do something with the tires. Right now, those tires are bulletproof, and they can just run them as hard as they want, which in concept, I know racing's about going fast, but in NASCAR, it's always been, up until 10 years ago, about preserving tires and being the fastest over a long run rather than fastest the whole time. And so
NASCAR's always been a distance.
yes, they're longer races. Yeah. It's about taking care of your equipment, taking care of the tires. And so I'm hoping, and Dale Jr. has been talking about this quite a bit on his podcast, they got to do something with the tires to make them wear out at an appropriate pace so that tire management becomes part of racing again in NASCAR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I missed the race, so I might have to see if I can go catch the second half of it.
Yes, it's well worth
somewhere.
it. Yeah.
Watch that part of it.
Okay. And then your next item?
All right, so my next item, I have been, this weekend, started watching 100 Days to Indy. So, as you know, never really been a big IndyCar person, probably of the major series, the one that I know the least about. And so it's been kind of fun to see a little bit of the inside of IndyCar, kind of in the same way that Drive to Survive introduced a lot of people to Formula One. And so I had a few thoughts while watching it. I think I'm halfway through the second season now. Number one is I want to be on the crew that has the misfortune of having to follow Pato O'Ward down to the beaches of Mexico to follow him for part of the shoot.
Okay.
Because that just looks absolutely miserable. So let me know where I can sign up for that because I'll be there. Number two that I thought was interesting was that on the first season, there's not a lot of background. And so it truly, the show is the 100 days up to Indy, from the beginning of the season to Indy, and then basically June 1st hits and that's it. You don't get anything from the rest of the year. And so in the first season, the background was a little bit on like past Indy champs, but otherwise like almost nothing on, this has been a series that's been going on. It was like, this is the first year that this is happening sort of thing. And so the second season has been interesting in that part of the episodes are going back and kind of reviewing what happened from, June 1st to the end of the season of the previous year, because the first season covered the first half of that year and then just stopped. And so that's been sort of interesting to see. I think it's an interesting format to follow the first third to half of the season, because the NASCAR version of this follows the playoffs, basically the last couple of races into the playoffs and the playoffs.
Right.
For F1, it follows the whole season.
Right.
And so I feel like it's sort of, I guess there's not a lot of sports that have their big event, a third of the way through the year. you know, you don't have your playoffs a third of the way through the year. You don't have your Super Bowl a third of the way through the year.
Right.
But you have the Indy 500 a third of the way through the year.
Yes.
And so it's just been interesting only seeing the first chunk of the year and then not having anything of what happened after that. So, been interesting. Kind of would like to see more of this season play out, but I guess I can also just watch it in real time.
Yes.
So, been noticing that. And then my third point, which I have a picture here for you, is that...
Which I think that means I will be inserting it into the video so you can see it.
Oh. My third point is that Colton Herta looks like he should be a hockey player.
Yes, he does.
So they introduce him as he's moving to Nashville. And so I don't know if it's just the combination of his look plus Nashville that made me go, oh, Nashville Preds. But anyway, I saw him and I went, you belong in hockey, not auto racing. So those have been my 3 observations so far from 100 Days to Indy.
All right. Well, what interesting big news in IndyCar this week when they announced that starting next year, the broadcasts will move from NBC to Fox. So that will be a big change for them.
Yeah.
This week, IndyCar kind of got hosed a little bit as far as broadcasting goes because NBC covers IMSA, NASCAR, and IndyCar. They had planned a triple header, the 6 hours at the Glen for IMSA, followed by the NASCAR race, followed by IndyCar at Laguna Seca. The rain delay at NASCAR forced the Laguna Seca to go on CNBC, which is not exactly where most sports fans would be looking for an auto race. So it was kind of ironic that the week that they announced the broadcast is going over to Fox next year, you have NBC running the IndyCar race on CNBC, which is their business network.
Right.
So, all right. 2 other things that I have.
Okay.
This last week, Formula One was at Barcelona. And Barcelona is considered the benchmark track where there's a little bit of everything at that track. So if you can do well at Barcelona, most likely you can do well at other tracks that might have more tight turns or more high-speed turns because Barcelona has a little bit of everything.
They do a lot of testing at Barcelona typically.
Yes, that's their test bed there. And this last week, no cautions, so there was nothing to disrupt the flow of the race. And Max Verstappen won once again, but he only won by 4 seconds. And last year and most of this year, he's been winning by 20 and 30 seconds. And so the upgrades that McLaren and some of the other teams have brought, Mercedes is doing much better. They have almost caught Max and Red Bull. They have certainly caught Checo and his Red Bull. So the points lead they've built up is pretty significant, but it's going to be an interesting rest of the year.
Yeah.
So
certainly more competitive than last year.
Yes. And then the last thing I have is, congratulations to Scottie Scheffler, who won his 6th tournament out of the last 10 that he's participated in, including winning his 2nd Masters green jacket. He is tearing up the PGA, and it doesn't look like he's slowing down. So that 6 victories in 10 also includes 2 runners up. So he's finished 1st or 2nd in 8 of 10 tournaments. So in the last 10 tournaments he's been in. So
yeah, that's something.
We won't see him again until the Open Championship in the British Open. He's taken a few weeks off to prepare for that. So
okay, I did not know that.
Yeah. All right. So next item.
What's coming up
this
week?
What's coming up in Tucson this week?
Well,
besides Monsoon.
I'm looking forward to a week and a day from now. which is the 4th of July, and there are several events, fireworks shows scattered throughout the greater Tucson area. So per usual, fireworks at A Mountain. If you are in Tucson proper, you should be able to see those pretty easily. And then Oro Valley, Marana, and Sarita are all having their own fireworks and celebration events. I've been to the Oro Valley one a couple of times. It's been free to get into, and food trucks, live music, that sort of event. One year they did a light show rather than fireworks because of fire danger, dryness that we had that year. But as far as I've heard, it's fireworks this year.
We've had enough rain the last week that it probably have soaked things down very nicely.
Yep.
So I have the advantage of, I live up on Dove Mountain, and if I go to my community clubhouse, I can put up a folding chair and I can watch the Oro Valley fireworks, the Tucson fireworks at A Mountain, and the Marana fireworks all from one spot.
And if you turn around, you can see the Ritz-Carlton.
Well, that is true. If I turn around, the Ritz-Carlton is behind me, and we can watch the fireworks there. Those are the only fireworks that we can actually hear, unfortunately. So if you're into the big boom part of it, you're not going to get that feel, which I kind of miss. But it is kind of fun to watch 3 different fireworks shows from one spot.
And I think last time we did this, Oro Valley and Marana were going off at the same time.
Yes.
So we could look one way for Oro Valley's and the other way for Marana's and see both of them. So
yeah,
I might just be at the barn for the fireworks this year, but
you're not very far from the park where they do the Oro Valley fireworks.
I'm close enough that I can hear the Oro Valley fireworks, and so I can see them, hear them, and then it allows me to keep an eye on the horses and make sure they're doing okay with the fireworks.
Now, how do they usually handle the fireworks?
They're normally pretty good with them. During the summer, because it's hot enough, I'll sometimes leave the fans running later into the night, just to help dampen the sound a little bit. But they're typically pretty good. So we haven't really had issues with that the last few years, but I'll keep an eye out on them and make sure that nothing's startling them. And then Luna Kitty normally just hangs out inside with us, so
Yes.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah.
So no dog to worry about.
Although when I was babysitting Luna here one time, there's a banger of a thunderstorm that passed overhead, and I have a photo of her standing on her hind legs looking at the front door.
You might have to find that photo.
Yes, I might have to find that photo and put it in here, because she was like, what's coming through that door? Because all right.
Yep.
So that's all we have for this week. We're going to, as many weeks as we can, do this. Sometimes when we're traveling or holidays or whatever, we might miss a week. But our goal is to do this, film it every Tuesday. We had client meetings yesterday, so we're filming on a Wednesday. And we'll get this out usually a day after the filming. So let us know your thoughts. Is there something else you'd like to hear about during these conversations? What did you like? What didn't you like? You know, it's our first episode, so
we'll make changes.
Yeah, we'll make changes.
As we always do.
Yep. So with that, have a great week.
See you next time.